This is the story of the day, and I'm not going to go chapter and verse into what's happened, because if you haven't heard it by now, well, you've been living under a rock. But of course, the pertinent thing for us is that the United States has put a 10% tariff on any product that we export to the United States. They say that's because we have some sort of reciprocal tariff on them. Simply not true. The justification here seems to be that we slap the GST on US products that come into Australia, but we also slap the GST on Australian products that are made here in Australia. It is not a tariff. So the justification for all of this, I cannot see. But Trump, of course, is not doing it for the rest of the world. He's doing it for the people at home. He's doing it for America first, which is what he was elected to do. And here he is saying this will be the rebirth of American industry.
Fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
And Trump specifically pointed out Australian beef, because we send a lot of beef to the United States. It is the best beef in the world, of course. But we refuse to take US beef because of concerns over mad cow disease. Now, the experts in the US say that's not a problem anymore. The experts here say we're not quite so sure about that. But he opened up the possibility, and we don't really know yet how this is going to land, of banning Australian beef altogether.
Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight.
We'll see where all of this actually lands. And of course, it's one thing that both leaders of the government and the opposition are on a unity ticket on, that these tariffs are bad. The Prime Minister Anthony Albanese tried to make hay while the sun shone today. He said this was not the act of a friend.
President Trump referred to reciprocal tariffs. A reciprocal tariff would be zero, not 10%. The administration's tariffs have no basis in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations partnership. This is not the act of a friend.
Now, what he says is right, and I suspect quietly Albanese might have been a little bit pleased that all of this played out as it did today, because it allows him to stand up and say, well, I'm going into bat for Australia, so it comes at a good time in the middle of an election campaign. But what justification is there for a 10% tariff on Australian products?
There's none whatsoever, and Albo is completely right. There is no justification. Whether Trump and the administration have got confused by the 10% GST on imports, because remember there were some that were exempt. If you bought stuff online from overseas, it was exempt, and then a GST was put on that. So does he suddenly think that that's what the GST is? Of course, in America, they have different states have different sales tax all over the country. Is that a tariff? Because you go to Wyoming and you pay a 7.5% or whatever it might be. I don't know. So he's absolutely right about that. And the issue, as you rightly said, the reason we have an issue with uncooked American beef coming to Australia is the same reason why anyone who brings a banana in here basically gets strip search, because we have really, really strict biosecurity laws because we are an island continent nation. But the interesting thing here is not what the US tariff, what will happen just because the US tariffs on Australia will do. It's because it's the tariffs that they're going to put on everyone else. So they're putting like 34% on China, I think it's 26% on India. Now, they are two of our biggest trading partners. I think India is our biggest market for education, which is our third of something biggest export. China, of course, our biggest export partner, full stop. So if those countries can't do trade with the US on even terms and can't export to them anymore, suddenly their growth collapses, their growth goes down. Global growth goes down from like 3 to 2%, some people are suggesting, but their growth in particular is going to get smashed because they're hit by tariffs that are a quarter to a third of the cost of the goods. And then, of course, they don't have their economies strong enough. They don't have big consumers there who want to buy Australian iron ore to build stuff because they're not getting richer anymore. They're not making more money. So The real worry is what it does to China and India and the effect that that then has on us rather than just each way. And then the other big thing to worry about will be what happens if they go after the PBS. Will they start telling the government that it's not allowed to negotiate, but basically, bulk buys of goods that it then subsidises and sells off to us for cheap prices so that we don't die. So I think if that happens, if suddenly you hear stories of people not being able to get access to life-saving cancer medication because, the big pharmaceutical companies in America, who Donald Trump's health minister is meant to be going to war with and keeping in check, whatever happened to that, RFK Jr., that's when I think people will get really, really furious. And the reason why, I won't say it's good for Anthony Albanese, but the reason why it's bad for Peter Dutton is because previously he'd sort of tried to wedge the government and Donald Trump said, I could have got a better deal. And he's been accused of being a bit like Trump himself, rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly. But that sticks. And the worse Trump is, the worse it is, I think, for Peter Dutton.